If you're an eBay seller, you've heard it all before. Watch out for scammy buyers. Document everything. Be wary of suspicious accounts and follow the rules to the letter. But what if the biggest threat to your small business wasn't some random scammer? What if the entity most likely to cost you your product and your money is the very platform you're selling on? I'm going to show you how certain eBay policies, designed to protect the platform, have created a system where sellers are often left holding the bag. This isn't just about a few bad sales. It's about a structure that puts almost all the risk on the people who actually build the marketplace, the sellers. We're going to look at the fine print and the policies that can be used against us, and expose why eBay's own system can feel like the biggest scam of all. I want to start with a story, and I have a feeling it's going to sound painfully familiar to a lot of you. A few months back, I sold a high-end camera lens I'd taken meticulous care of. It was worth about $900. I considered myself a pretty seasoned seller. I took more than a dozen high-res photos showing its pristine condition. I wrote a detailed, honest description. I listed it, and a few days later, it sold. I packed that thing like it was a Fabergé egg, bubble wrap, a reinforced box, packing peanuts, the whole 9 yards. I even filmed myself packing it, showing the lens going into the box and the box being sealed. I took it to the post office, got a receipt, and shipped it with tracking and signature confirmation, just like eBay tells you to. I did everything by the book. The tracking updated, delivered, signed for. I thought, great, another smooth sale. 3 days later, I get the notification. Return requested. The reason, item not as described. My heart just sank. The buyer's message was short and made no sense. Lens doesn't work, it's broken. That was impossible. The lens was perfect when I shipped it. I politely messaged the buyer, asking for more details, or maybe some photos of the supposed damage. The reply I got back was a single word: refund. I knew what was going on. This was either buyer's remorse, or worse, a straight-up scam. So, I went to eBay's dispute process. I uploaded my photos, the video of me packing the box, the tracking number, the signature confirmation, a mountain of proof showing I did everything right. I explained that the buyer wouldn't give me any proof of their claim. I felt sure eBay would see what was really happening. The response I got felt cold and automated. It said that under the eBay money-back guarantee, I had to accept the return. Not only that, but I also had to pay for the return shipping label. I had no real choice. If I refused, the buyer would get to keep the lens and get a full refund, and my account would get a defect. So, I paid for the label and waited. A week later, a box shows up. It was my box, but it felt light. I opened it, and inside wasn't my $900 lens. It was an old, broken, third-party lens from the 80s, covered in dust and fungus, worth less than the shipping I was forced to pay. The buyer had swapped my item and used eBay's own system to make me pay for the privilege of getting robbed. I immediately got back in touch with eBay support, this time furious. I sent photos of the junk lens I received, photos of the box, everything. I explained the bait and switch. And what was the final verdict from eBay? We are unable to determine what was in the return package. The tracking shows the item was returned to you. We have issued a full refund to the buyer from your account. Just like that, I was out $900. Plus the original shipping costs, plus the return shipping costs. eBay took the money from my account and sided with someone who had clearly committed mail fraud. I followed every single one of their rules, and their system didn't protect me. It just made the scam easier to pull off. And this is where it gets worse. As I was stewing in my frustration, I started digging. I went to seller forums, Reddit, and YouTube comments. and I found thousands of stories just like mine. Stories of empty boxes being returned, of broken junk sent back in place of expensive electronics, of obvious lies being rewarded with full refunds. What happened to me wasn't a fluke or a single bad customer service rep. It feels like a feature of eBay's platform, not a bug. eBay's core policies, especially its famous money-back guarantee, have unintentionally created a playground for scammers, and sellers are the ones who pay the price. The platform doesn't always act like a fair referee. It has set up its rules to heavily favor one side because, frankly, it's easier and cheaper for them. They've made a business calculation. It's more cost-effective to lose a percentage of sellers than to invest in a truly fair and nuanced dispute system. They've decided that your inventory, your time, and your money are acceptable losses to keep buyers happy and spending. My personal nightmare led me to a shocking realization. The buyer was just using the rulebook that eBay itself wrote. Let's talk about the main tool in this system, the eBay money-back guarantee. On the surface, it sounds great. It gives buyers confidence. The policy says, if a buyer doesn't get an item, or if it doesn't match the listing, they can get a full refund. But how that's interpreted is where sellers get crushed. The most abused phrase on the platform is item not as described, or NAD. For a scammer, this is a golden ticket. A buyer can get a perfect item, exactly as described, and still file an NAD claim. Maybe they just have buyer's remorse. But if they admit that, they might have to pay for return shipping. So instead, they click item not as described and invent a problem. There's a scratch I didn't see. It smells funny. The color is a little different than I thought. It doesn't matter how small or fake the claim is. The moment a buyer files that NAD claim, the system essentially puts the seller on the defensive. You're immediately pushed to accept the return, and most importantly, you're forced to pay for the return shipping. There isn't a great way to challenge the buyer's claim at this stage. While eBay has started asking buyers for photo evidence more often, especially for pricey items, it's not consistent, and sellers can't count on it. The system is designed to just process the return, because that's the path of least resistance. This enables a few common scams. First, the free rental. Someone needs a nice camera for a weekend trip, or a specific tool for a one-time job. They buy it on eBay, use it, and then file a fake NAD claim to send it back for a full refund. The seller is stuck paying for shipping both ways, basically paying for the buyer to borrow their item for free. Second, and much worse, is the bait and switch, which is what happened to me. A buyer purchases something valuable, an iPhone, a graphics card, a piece of jewelry. They file an NAD claim, and then return something completely different, a broken, counterfeit, or just plain old junk item. As long as that return tracking number shows delivered back to the seller's zip code, eBay's automated system often closes the case and refunds the buyer. The seller is left with a worthless item and a huge financial loss. Trying to prove what was actually in that return box is an uphill battle that sellers rarely win. And then there's the empty box claim, where a buyer gets their item and just lies, saying the box was empty. Even with tracking that proves delivery, eBay often sides with the buyer, leaving the seller out of both their product and their money. The system has taught a segment of buyers that they can get things for free just by lying, because the platform is set up to believe them over the people who pay the fees. But wait, you might be thinking, what about eBay seller protection? It's a phrase eBay loves to use to give sellers a sense of security. It sounds like a shield, but in practice, it's got a lot of holes and exceptions that make it fail right when you need it most. The protections are decent for very specific things, like a buyer falsely claiming they never received an item when tracking clearly shows it was delivered, but it offers very limited protection against the most common and costly scams. It generally doesn't protect you from a fraudulent item not as described claim, and it doesn't protect you from a buyer returning a different item. A seller can report that the wrong item was sent back, but the default action is often still to refund the buyer, leaving the seller to fight a long and usually unsuccessful appeal. And let's talk about chargebacks. That's when a buyer skips eBay and goes straight to their credit card company. A scammer can get your item, then file a chargeback claiming it was an unauthorized transaction. While eBay's seller protection says it can cover these, the reality is a bureaucratic headache, and the final decision is up to the buyer's bank, not eBay. Sellers often lose these, getting hit with a refund and a hefty dispute fee. On top of that, eBay's enforcement against buyers who abuse the system is famously inconsistent. Sellers can report buyers for abusing returns or making false claims. But what happens to them? Often it feels like nothing. These accounts are frequently allowed to keep operating, moving on to the next seller. Why? Because every buyer is a potential future sale. eBay is hesitant to ban customers, even those who are clearly working the system. This inaction isn't just frustrating, it's a business decision that allows fraudulent behavior to continue. But you don't have to take my word for it. Spend 10 minutes on any online seller community. Go to the eBay subreddit, or even eBay's own forums, and you will find a wall of frustration. You'll see post titles like "eBay always sides with the buyers." "I'm a victim of fraud." "eBay does not protect sellers." And "eBay money-back guarantee is a scam." You'll read stories from people out thousands of dollars. A seller who sold a rare sealed video game, only to get back an opened used copy. An electronics reseller who received a box of actual garbage instead of the laptop they sold. A clothing seller who constantly gets returns that have clearly been worn and stained. These aren't just isolated incidents. It's a clear pattern. These are the voices of small business owners who feel betrayed by the platform that was supposed to empower them. They talk about spending hours on the phone with support, just to be read from a script. They describe presenting clear evidence of fraud, only to be ignored. There's this shared feeling of being powerless, like the game is rigged. These sellers aren't just mad about losing fair disputes. They're frustrated about being forced to take part in scams, where the system leaves them with no real recourse. The side effects of these broken policies don't stop there, because eBay's system can feel so hostile. Some sellers get desperate, and scammers know how to exploit that. They'll often pressure a seller to complete a deal outside of eBay, offering to pay with Zelle, a wire transfer, or some other method, maybe for a slightly higher price. Why? Because the second you go off-platform, any and all protections, as weak as they may be, are gone. You are completely on your own. A scammer might convince a seller to move the conversation to email, then use phishing links to steal information or send a fake payment confirmation. eBay has clear rules against this, but the hostile environment on the platform pushes some sellers to consider these risky moves just to avoid high fees and what feels like an unfair system. It's a vicious cycle where bad policy pushes people into even more dangerous situations. So what does this all mean for you as a seller? If this story sounds familiar, you're not alone. This is the moment we stop feeling isolated. Share your own story in the comments. Let's show just how widespread this problem is. What did you sell? What kind of scam did you face? And how did eBay's system fail you? The more of us that speak up, the harder we are to ignore. And if this video is shedding some light on what you've gone through, give it a like so the algorithm shows it to more sellers who need to hear it. And subscribe for more deep dives into the platforms that shape our businesses. Let's turn all this individual frustration into a collective voice. To be clear, this isn't to say that every buyer on eBay is a scammer. Not at all. The vast majority of transactions go through without a hitch. But you judge a system's fairness not by how it works when things go right, but by how it handles conflict. And when there's a conflict, eBay's system often feels designed to fail its sellers. The money-back guarantee has been twisted from a tool for buyer confidence into a weapon for seller extortion. The seller protection program sounds reassuring, but it's a paper-thin shield against the most common types of fraud. And the company's inconsistent policing of abusive buyers shows a fundamental lack of regard for seller security. eBay has announced some recent changes, like automatically leaving positive feedback for sellers and adjusting some return policies. But these feel like small bandages on a much larger wound. They don't fix the core problem. A dispute system where the seller is often assumed to be in the wrong and is forced to finance their own victimization. Until eBay makes fundamental changes to create a truly balanced and evidence-based process, the platform's own structure will continue to be the biggest risk many sellers face. So be careful, document everything, but understand that even when you do everything right, you're operating in a system that can still feel like it's designed for you to lose.